Hello and welcome to The Long View, a podcast that takes a closer look at the games people play. The Long View is a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. Go and check out all of the fantastic sister podcasts in the network and see what is there for you. Whether you're looking for something that kind of light and fun, like Flip the Table, whether you're looking to learn something kind of serious, there's Ludology. Regardless of what your gaming tastes are, your preferences are, your entertainment style is, you're going to find something there on the Dice Tower Network. So go and check out all of the great podcasts in the Dice Tower Network at dicetower.com. The Long View is generously sponsored by GameSurplus.com. Go and check out what makes GameSurplus my favorite online retailer. I'll tell you right now, a couple episodes ago, I had mentioned that I had reached out to Carmen and Elaine, the owners and operators of GameSurplus, and said, hey, I've heard great things about this game Roundhouse. It's almost impossible to find anywhere. And Carmen's like, I'm on it. Let me contact him, see if I can get it. Well, he just got shipment notification a little while ago, so he's going to have some copies of Roundhouse coming in, people, but hands off, one of them's mine. But, you know, if you're looking for a game, that's the kind of customer service that you'll get from GameSurplus.com. They are just wonderful at tracking down hard-to-find items. If you're looking for something, got something on your wish list, they are just a fantastic resource for the gaming community. They have great pricing and super fast and safe shipping. They have a new web design that they're kind of in the process of going through and bringing all sorts of other community news to the Game Surplus site to sort of foster the hobby in general and not just their store, not just their online store, but also giving news about local conventions and events and things of that nature to really try and grow the hobby and be an advocate for all of the games we love to play. So that's GameSurplus.com. Go and check them out. And if you do, please be sure to tell them The Long View sent you. My name is Jeff Gamble. I'm the host of The Long View, and today I'm very pleased to be joined by my co-host, T.C. Reed. T.C., good morning.
Good morning, Jeff.
Nice to have you back on, and I'm glad that we were able to get you back on at some time other than sunrise. So we are managing to be a little bit better about your schedule out there on the West Coast, and so I appreciate you joining us as always, T.C.
Yeah, it's noon here. It's a lot better than morning.
Fantastic, fantastic. And joining us today is Don Sheldon. Don, welcome.
Well, I'm glad to be here. That's so strange to hear you say my name.
Well, Don was nice enough to reach out a while ago and say, hey, I would like to do an episode about one of my favorite games, Arkham Horror. And I was like, okay, I'm all over that because I've been wanting to kind of do that episode for a while because it's a very, very influential game. It's been around for ages. It's seen so many expansions and spin-offs, and there's no denying the popularity of the game, no denying the staying power of the game. And it is one of the first games that kind of comes to mind at times when you talk about that sort of Ameritrash style of game, the sort of thematic gaming experience. And so I said, okay, yeah, this would be awesome. So Don and I worked on our schedules for a little bit there and kind of went back and forth for a bit and finally found today. And I'm very grateful that you decided to join us today, Don, to talk about Arkham Horror, because this is a game that I have heard of and heard a lot about, but I've really only played like once. So I don't have a lot of experience with this game. So I'm thrilled that the both of you were here because I understand both of you love this game, yes?
Absolutely, yeah. It had the biggest buzz when I came back into board games after my pseudo slowdown between leaving college and getting settled into to the married life. And yeah, it was the hottest thing at the time when that finally started to ramp up again.
And what about you, TC? I mean, is this a game that you've been a fan of since it originally came out, or did you come into it later? Or what about you?
This was my entry into board gaming, into modern board gaming. I got this as a Mother's Day present for Carissa on a whim, just going into a board game store.
No, wait a minute. All right, I gotta wait. In the last
monsters
episode,
in the 20s? Are you a mom?
No, listen,
don't go together.
No, but this is hilarious because so let me tell you, Don, the last episode that we recorded, which is actually going to drop today, which is Sunday, the 7th of May. You know, TC was telling us how he had bought a Study in Emerald for his wife as a Mother's Day present.
That was the bad version.
It didn't really go over well.
No.
And so now I'm hearing that for Mother's Day on another year, he bought her Arkham Horror. And I'm like, wait a minute. Are these really gifts for Carissa, or are these gifts for yourself, sir?
Does she have tentacles?
Well, okay, there's a few reasons behind it. One of them was the time period. Carissa likes that 20s, 30s thing era.
Mm-hmm.
Two, we were really, really heavy into role-playing games, and we played the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, and this had
Gotcha.
on it Call of Cthulhu, the board game. And the first expansion that came out for it was an Egyptian expansion, which was the Dark Pharaoh, I believe. One of the expansions. So I'm like, oh, I could get this game, and there's an Egyptian theme to go with it. Carissa was reading the Amelia Peabody books at the time, was really into the Egyptian lore. So it seemed like a win-win, and it was. Unlike studying Emerald several years later, which didn't go over as well.
All right. Well, maybe then I will give you credit then for that Mother's Day present as being something that totally lined up with her, because I know you were trying to do the Sherlock Holmes thing for studying Emerald. It didn't quite work out for you. Yeah. So while we're on the subject here, guys, let's kind of just give a brief kind of overview here. So Arkham Horror is a game that came out in 2005, according to BGG. It is currently rated a 7.4. Its overall rank is 197, although in thematic rankings, it's listed at a 69. For 1 to 8 players, saying it's about 120 to 240 minutes. And I would say, based on my whopping one-play experience, 120 minutes, unless everybody really just does terribly, this is a longer game. I would say, our game, I think, took close to 3 hours. Now, that was with rules explanation, so maybe that was part of it too. But I'll be curious to hear later what your guys' thoughts are about the gameplay time. In this game, you are basically trying to put down and stop the invasion of the elder gods that are trying to come through and take over our world. And you're the investigators. You're a team that's kind of going in there. And so it's got a little bit of that role-playing feel because each of the players will assume, if I understand correctly, kind of like the role of a different persona or character who has different strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. And it's set in the town of Arkham. Now, since the initial sort of success of the game, designed by Richard Lanius and Kevin Wilson, by the way, which I probably should have said right off the bat, there were just a slew of expansions that were released. TC, you already made reference to one of them, which is the Curse of the Pharaoh or something of that nature. Curse of the Dark Pharaoh. That came out in 2006, but there's been, just so many expansions. You've got the Black Gate of the Woods expansion. You've got, oh my goodness, you've got, now, I don't know, is Innsmouth Horror an I believe that's an expansion as well, yeah? There's
8 official ones, I think, if you don't count the Fantasy Flight yearly, here's our special monster we made just for tonight episodes. Okay. There's 4 that come in large boxes with boards, and 4 that come in tiny boxes.
Yeah, there's like big boards and tiny expansion boxes. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so even back then, Fantasy Flight was really good at churning out expansions. Is what I'm kind of taking from that. But I bring it up not just for the churn and burn of the business model, but because there had to be a call for it. There had to be people out there who were just wanting to continue this game and get some new elements, get some new locations. It was so amazingly popular. And it continues to be popular. Every time I go to a convention, there's people playing this thing. So this is a game that has, really, really stood the test of time. And that's kind of one of the things that we really look for here on the Long View. So my basic introduction to this game is really simple, guys. I was at a convention. I was talking with Shelly, and she was telling me how this was her favorite game. And later on, I met up with a bunch of guys I'd never met before. I was at the WBC, sat down, and played a game. This is kind of the same way that I experienced, what the heck was that Tom Vassel's favorite game with all the different...
Cosmic Encounter.
No, not Cosmic. No, I've played Cosmic. It's Duel of Ages,
Oh,
I sat down and learned Duel of Ages. And yeah, and both of these games, are very thematic, very rules intensive. And that's where it kind of gets a little bit of that RPG feel. There's quite a voluminous amount of text that goes along with it. But, the art of the game, the presentation of the game draws you in. The theme of the game did not draw me in. I have never really been a Lovecraft fan. So, the theme kind of did nothing for me. I was kind of getting into it just to see what all the fuss was about. And I will say, after my experience of playing the game, it definitely tells a story. And there are definitely moments that are hilarious, and there are definitely moments that are very tense. And it really does feel like that sort of thematic experience that's trying to blur the lines between a board game and a role-playing game. But that's pretty much all the experience I personally have with this game. And that was just the base game that we were playing. So what I'd like to do is, first, TC, can you tell us a little bit about maybe your background? And then we'll get to our special guest who can tell us a little bit about his background.
Okay. There's a little bit more I want to add to the history of this game. The Fantasy Flight version is actually the reprint. This was actually a re-implementation of it that was published in 1987. It was Chaosium who did the Call of Cthulhu series. They had it, and they did that was the first iteration of it. And Richard Launius actually created this game because he wanted to be able to play Call of Cthulhu by himself. It actually played the role-playing game. You can just do it alone. And it was Fantasy Flight who jumped in and said, hey, we want to reprint this game from you guys. And so the 2005 edition is actually a re-implementation of the original edition of this game.
Wasn't the first one like a roll and move? Like I remember, I saw the board art and it's just a big
I've actually
with maybe a one loop in it.
Yeah, I've seen it, but it was unfortunately behind a glass case, going for like 150 and 200 bucks. So I wasn't able to touch it or look at it other than from behind a glass case. I don't know anything about the original edition, but yeah, I think there was like some roll and move, and it looked a lot like Talisman, kind of, was a roll and move. But I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it would. Yeah.
So that's just, yeah. So that's a little bit more background into that, and in terms of talking about the expansions, there's actually an expansion for this game called the Miskatonic University, which is an expansion for all the other expansions. That's how crazy this game got with expansions before they stopped doing expansions for it. So it's
not a complete game. It requires this game isn't just an expansion. Miskatonic is this game previous expansion. Otherwise, don't even bother buying this one.
Yeah.
Too many.
Right. Don, I'm going to ask you to give that response again because you kind of pixeled out on us there from an audio standpoint. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. All right.
Thing on that?
Yeah. Okay, I didn't explain that well enough. I apologize. Yeah. If I hear something that's no, that's fine. Sometimes with a Google Hangout or anything of that nature, you'll get some audio problems where you get kind of garbled. And so if I hear that in the middle of an answer, I might stop you and say, okay, TC, can you say that again? And then I'll kind of give you a little countdown, a 3, 2, 1. And then where you imagine 0 would be, you just start right up again, talking from where you left off. And then I edit all that out in post. So you were, so, okay. All right. So you remember what you were talking about. There we go. Okay, here we go. Ready? In 3, 2, 1.
Now, Miskatonic University, that expansion, like you see these board games, or you see an expansion in the store, it will say, this is not a complete game. You must buy this other game first. Miskatonic is an expansion for the expansions. It says something on the shrink of, you not only at least one and preferably more previous expansions, or don't bother buying this one. So it's just layers on top of layers. I think Arkham Horror wins the award for the king of all expansions.
Yeah, it's definitely, up until they got like some licenses, it was definitely one of the titles that was just as a treadmill for Fantasy Flight. It was just amazing to see all the things they were producing for it. I agree.
Well, Don, could you tell us a little bit about what it is that drew you to this game in the first place, and why it's become one of your absolute favorites? Because for me, the theme didn't hold much of an attraction. Was the theme and the source material sort of the reason for your attraction, or was it something else?
I'm having a lot of audio problems.
Yeah. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. I'm going to see if anyone else in the house is using the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Oh, Wi-Fi. Did I mention our Wi-Fi went down in our house?
Did it really? I'm not having any problems with your audio. I am having a problem with his audio.
Yeah, because I'm tapped into my mother-in-law's Wi-Fi right now. I'm cheating.
Nice.
Yeah. Most of my family left to go to the mall, but there is one person still here, and I'm going to see if they are like watching Netflix or something.
Right. The only other thing that we can do to try to help each other that I will try to curate for us is we all need to try to make sure that we're talking one at a time. So I'll be kind of trying to direct the conversation. Don, what do you think of that? Or TC, what do you think of that? Because every time I start to kind of go like, oh, really? Or, something like that, it fuzzes the sound out on us. So we'll try to keep it real strict to one voice at a time because obviously we're having a little bit of technical problems. If it continues, we can stop the broadcast and then I can launch another one and restart, see if we get a better connection the second time. But let's wait and see what happens if there's someone else who's using your network and hitting it hard at the moment.
I've got nothing today. I'm actually looking through my Arkham Horror board game so I can talk about it.
There we go.
So I ran down a copy of speaking Game Surplus. I had them run down me a copy of this ant game called My Remies. That's super hard to find. That is a fun little crunchy Euro game, Jeff.
Yeah, it's pretty nifty. A friend of mine brought it over. I think it was Mermies. Oh, no. He brought over March of the Ants. And I played March of the Ants. I didn't play Mermies. So, yeah, I'll be curious to maybe, do an episode and kind of talk about the differences between the two. Because, it's odd that you have two ant-themed games.
Well, considering I studied entomology as an undergrad, I'm like, ooh, bug games. I want this one. And then Tim and Ryan are local up here, the designers of March of the Ant. So I actually got to play test that one and run it through, and I like that game. It's Eclipse in 2 hours, which is nice. Yeah.
I like it a whole lot more than I thought I was going to. Let's put it that way. All right, so Don, you're telling us that things sound better a little bit now?
Yep, you guys are no longer in a tin can.
All right, there we go. So let's try and pick it up from where we were. I had asked you the question about what was it that drew you to the game? Was it the theme, the source material that drew you to the game, or was it something else? And then you reply...
You being me? I can't tell you if you hear me.
You're on the spot, dude.
Oh, poor Don. Yeah.
Too many
at this point, too many use. And then you, Don, tell us what got you interested in the game in the first place. All right, you got some thoughts formulated there? You want me to give you a minute?
No, I can go. Just
okay, cool. All right, here we go.
Relax,
3,
it's okay.
It's all good, man. It's all good. In 3, it's the magic of editing. In 3,
it is.
2, 1.
I think I first got into Arkham around the time it was first published. My wife and I, when we moved out to the house that we're still in, most of our friends from college were just too far away to conveniently interact with. And then we were happy enough to find a couple that lived just 5 minutes away. And then all of a sudden, once there were 4 of us in one place, everybody came to visit again. And I guess that was around the time Arkham Horror came out. That was one of the popular games that we were all doing at the time. And I don't remember the details on when I bought my own copy, but once I got the first game, I think we also got Innsmouth Horror at the same time with that one expansion. And since then, I think I'm only missing one now. I never got the Black Goat of the Woods. That's what got me in there, and I love the theme. I think it's fantastic. When I played last night to refresh my memory of how this all works, not only did I have to teach my 8-year-old while caring for a sick baby, which was hard enough in its own right, but I had this fear in the back of my head that, because I've been getting into a lot more strategic and tactical games, like my wife and I play a very cutthroat Catan against each other, but Arkham, I remember being more control about what's going on. It's just, it's kind of a random fest, and it'll be fun, but it's not really deep or anything. But playing with my son, I brought I didn't use any of the expansion stuff. I brought it down to just the absolute basics, and we had a blast. And it was all the theme. I'm reading the cards and voices. He's sitting there waiting, staring at me, all terrified. He got really into it. When he finally flamethrowered Yig in the face to save the world, he screamed at the top of his lungs, I got him! I was dead at the time, but he won the game.
So he will mourn your loss. You will be remembered, my friend, because he was able to flamethrow him in the face. I like that. So
he asked to play again today, but we didn't have time yet.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's always a good sign, right? Well, I hope your other child is doing better, and that you guys have a chance to maybe get to play this again, maybe when we're done recording. So the source material for you was a winner. Were you a person that read the stories before you played the board game, or did the board game lead you to the stories, or have you still not read the stories?
Yeah. I am terribly unwell read. I knew a lot of Cthulhu mythos by osmosis, like the same way I learned superheroes. I've never read a comic book, but I can tell you all about like weird details of the X-Men. I've only recently started reading any Lovecraft, but I can tell you strange details about bits and corners of it that I don't even remember how I know them. I've always found it enjoyable.
That's what kind of drew you.
It's a weird thing. I don't know. It gets into my head. I don't know how.
Well, for me, I know, Don, I kind of started off being aware of Cthulhu because I had the old deities and demigods when I played AD&D. And that original, I think, printing of deities and demigods had all of the Cthulhu myths. And so that was really my first sort of introduction to that whole thing. And then I remember trying to read the books, and I found them to be kind of impenetrable and a little slow. So maybe I read the wrong ones or whatever. So I kind of ended up giving up on that personally. But like you, I kind of had some idea of what the theme was and what was going on and what the what the sort of general storyline and story arc was about. But I never really dove into the source material. So the reason I'm harping on this, guys, because TC, I'm going to ask you next, is because I'm always curious when it comes to thematic games, whether it's War of the Ring or whatever it happens to be, how much investment you have to have in the source material in order to enjoy the game. So if you're playing Battlestar Galactica, I remember the first time I played it, I had not seen the new series. And so to me, I was just kind of like, it didn't really do anything for me. After watching the whole series and immersing myself in that world, I was much more eager to sort of explore that game and found it more enjoyable. War of the Ring, same thing. I had read all those books as a kid. And so when I play War of the Ring, I'm finding all these little things and places on the map. And, oh, yeah, that's where that is. And, oh, I remember this from the story. And, it just kind of was an easy thing for me to slip right into that world. And so that's why I'm kind of going on about this, because I'm curious as to what degree does the enjoyment of the game depend on your familiarity with that source material? So for me, I had very little. Don, you had some that you kind of picked up through osmosis, as you put it, different sort of things that, so you were kind of in a little bit better position than I was. What about you, TC? Let's hear your story on this.
Okay, my first exposure to the Lovecraftian mythology was in middle school. I was a very strange child. I know that's come as a great surprise. And I read a lot of Stephen King in middle school. I was obsessed with Stephen King because it came around at that time. The Shining. I love those books. And Stephen King recommended a movie he really liked. It was called Evil Dead. So I'm like, oh, I gotta check this movie out. So I managed to get a hold of Evil Dead, and of course, in Evil Dead, and Sam Raimi got exposed to that, and got Bruce Campbell, which was great. And they had a book called the Necronomicon that summoned the dead. And I was like, oh, what's the Necronomicon? Where did this come from? I want to look into this. And that's how I got, that was a literary creation from Lovecraft for his stories. And that was my introduction into that's how I got exposed to the Lovecraft mythology. And it was way back in middle school.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story. I remember Stephen King as well, and had a lot of fond memories of reading a lot of Stephen King novels, and remember thinking that it was one of the best Stephen King books that I had ever read. I put it up there with The Stand, The Shining, all of those great books, until it turns out it's a giant space spider. And then I wanted to throw the book across the room. I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. This clown has been going on terrorizing, and it's like
dead moody out.
It's a stupid space spider. Who the heck? I remember being so bitterly disappointed. I was just like, if you could chop out the last 100 pages of that book and replace it with something better, it would be an absolute monument. Oh, it was terrible.
It's hard to go from Pennywise, which is, I mean, holy cow, that's creepy clown. This is the spider.
It was very awkward, and I remember being very disappointed in that. But that's just my little pet peeve there. So yeah, your point is well taken. You know, like you'll read something, you'll hear a recommendation, you'll go somewhere, you'll dig, you'll explore, and you'll find something really cool. So all right, so that kind of gets people out there an understanding of where we are when it comes to Lovecraft. So none of us, it sounds, were huge, diehard, can quote you text from Lovecraft novels as if I wrote it myself kind of people. Am I understanding this correctly?
That's correct.
Never to that level.
All right, so we got
Lovecraft is a very dense read. It's like reading Tolkien.
No, dude, no. Tolkien is dry, and like Lovecraft is like Sahara dry, and like eating sand, and you know, I've talked about him.
Except you won't say that.
Oh my!
It's undescribable.
It is. It's undescribable. Exactly. It's the most undescribable thing ever imagined by the mind of man that will drive you to the brink of insanity with its ultimate strangeness and non-being. And you're like, wait a minute, dude, that's too many superlatives in one sentence. I can't follow that. So
your job as a writer
weird archaic words.
Yeah, so all right, so you know, all kidding aside, I mean, I don't want to mock the dude. He certainly has left a lasting imprint on horror fiction, without a doubt. Not my style at all, not my speed, and you know, that's totally fine. But yeah, there's no denying the influence of the writer, the influence of the stories. And now, you know, let's kind of try and dive into the game. So when we were talking about this originally, Don, you were talking about how, you know, you guys had kind of moved and you weren't as close to some of the people that you used to hang out with, and you met some other people, and then you kind of started getting into this game. Before we kind of go any further, do one of you gentlemen want to kind of take point and just sort of give a general overview of the gameplay for people out there who maybe have not yet tried this thing? Kind of, you know, what are the goals of the game? What are the basic mechanisms of the game? That kind of thing. So, of course, I'm going to defer to you first, Dom. Would you like to maybe take a shot at that, or do you want to pass it on over to TC?
I just taught this game to an 8-year-old, so I think I'm ready to handle this.
Beautiful. All right, here we go.
All right. So in this game, each player has, well, I'll start off with its cooperative. You're all working together. You have one character that each person is controlling. You've got your guy and I've got mine. And you've got various statistics. You've got your sanity and your health. You've got your capacity to fight and to cast spells when that comes up. Everyone gets certain items to start, common and magical items. You've got money. You've got clues. All this stuff gets piled in a corner in front of you, and you're looking at it and saying, well, what do I do with it? So then what you're doing, after all the setup is complete, you've got the city of Arkham, Massachusetts laid out there with all of its various locations. The game technically begins when you draw the first Mythos card. The Mythos card is the terrible things that the game does to you in the style of all, and this is how the game fights back. And there are a bunch of components on that card. Even the pieces have pieces. And like I've had to memorize the order to read the card in. Like when they re-implemented this in Eldritch Horror, they had the card go in order from top to bottom. Not so in Arkham. It goes kind of clockwise from the bottom left. A gate opens up, which is the passageways through which the Great Old One is entering the world, and those eventually are what you have to close and stop from reopening. So first a gate opens, a monster comes out, the Great One comes closer to taking over the world. Then the card will have a series of events, either a one-time thing or an ongoing effect will happen. Then, almost always, another clue appears on the board. But this sometimes doesn't work. I'll get to that later. And finally, the last bit is all the monsters move in this interesting kind of organized way. Half of them will go one direction, half go the other way, and it's sort of a march of these two circles passing through each other. Not all of them move all the time. Sometimes they do. And the biggest thing about the Mythos card is that it's just so random. I've got a stack now. I don't even have all the expansions, but I would say that my pile is about 6 inches tall. None of them are sleeved. If you see the same card more than twice in your lifetime, at that point, you get kind of concerned. You've been playing way too long. So then that Mythos cards happen, and that will happen at the end of every turn from here on out. Bad things will happen. The players will do their stuff, which is first, everybody moves. Moving also, of course, includes fighting those monsters along the way or sneaking past them. Then everyone still in Arkham, because you can leave, will have an encounter there. And the board has, I think, 8, 9, 10, 11 locations, something like that. Each one has a deck of cards. So many cards. Each one has a deck of cards that will give you a random encounter at that spot. Sometimes you can choose to, instead of having an encounter, do a fixed thing on the board. This is where you, like if you go to the shops, you can buy things. If you go to the hospital, you can get healed. But again, you always have the choice to take the card draw, and something wacky happens. Then, instead of those two things, the third possibility is that you have moved on top of that gate that we talked about before, and you will fall through that gate into another dimension. There are, I want to say, 8 at the bottom of the board. And they're the Dreamlands and the Great Hall of Solano and all these Lovecraftian locations. The fourth phase of the turn is those Outworld encounters. So your one encounter in the city is to fall into the other dimension. Then you're in the other dimension and you have an encounter there. There is yet another stack of cards. You pull those until you find one that matches a certain color. This time they're color-coded. As a side note, I lived with a guy who was colorblind for a while, and that gets complicated.
Yeah.
That will give you a random encounter there. Something good or bad might happen, and then you'll draw another Mythos card. Definitely bad stuff. The best you can hope to do there is nothing happens at all, and you start the whole cycle over again. I think that covers general gameplay. The specifics, if enough gates open, you lose. The Great One rises. If the Doom track fills, it's rising, but you can close gates. You can't really undo Doom too easily. The Great One will rise. If you need to pull a monster out of the bag, but you're out of monsters, the Great One rises. If a gate needs to open, but there's no gates left, the Great One rises. Basically, for things, or you'll have a big fight on your hand. But, and this is the big change from the original Arkham Horror, it used to be Great One rises, the world's over, you're dead. Cthulhu eats 1d4 investigators per round, don't even try. That kind of stuff. But in Arkham Horror, this Arkham Horror, you get a chance to fight back. The various great old ones, because each one changes the rules differently when you choose them at the beginning of the game. The game gets its own character to play, essentially. Last night with my son, we did Yig, who's considered one of the easier ones, but even that fight is really hard. Only one of the two of us lived, and my son only won because he had a flamethrower.
Nice. And that's a good story in and of itself, I'm sure. So, well, thank you for that general game overview. And, it definitely matches my recollections, my fuzzy recollections as they were. And yeah, it's very much a card-driven game. You brought up an interesting point that I'm kind of curious about, Don. I want to get both your guys' take on this, which is you said that, you played this game a lot, and then more recently you've been into more sort of strategic games and things of that nature. Do you feel that this game is an experience game, or do you feel that there's enough control in the decisions that you make that you can make the game more tactical or strategic? In other words, I think about the far end of the spectrum for me in experience games is a game called Tales of the Arabian Nights. And that's a game where, you're traveling around, you're having encounters, and the results of those encounters are often extraordinarily random. You do something that you think is good or helpful, and you get punished. You do something that you think is bad, that might lead to bad, consequences, you get rewarded. Or vice versa, or anything in between, or who knows. It's a very, very random game. And what it does is it gives you this great story by the end. It gives you an experience that's fun. It's shared. But you really have very little agency or control over what's going on in that game. Where does this game fall in that spectrum? So I'd like to start with you, Don, and then TC, I'd like your opinion on this as well, because both you guys have played this a lot.
I went into our game yesterday, and again, it had been a year since I had played, worrying that it was going to be one of those just an experience games. I used to really dislike Betrayal at House on the Hill because I felt like the first half of the game, you have no idea what you're doing. You can't plan for anything. Then the haunt happens, and maybe you've already lost. Maybe there's a chance. Either way, man. I ended up making my own mini goals for Betrayal. My goal was to always go to encircle the entryway so that there's no possible way to get to the entrance. I thought that would be hilarious because I just found nothing else interesting in that game. But now I don't mind so much. Now it's fun to have that experience. Game because you're having a good time, you're having fun. I no longer poo-poo that as a lesser person's game or anything. And going into Arkham yesterday, I thought it was going to be my memory was that it was going to be one of those experience things where I couldn't really control what was going on, and we would just go and get through it and have a story to tell, but not really have it be our story. But my experience yesterday reminded me that is not the case. Again, on the board, those fixed encounters, they make plan ahead. Like, I'm going to go to the shop and I'm going to buy something to help kill these monsters with. You can make that kind of plan. Also, each of the locations, there are icons that try to tell you what kinds of things might happen in the random encounters. For it as you play. Like, I remember last night specifically thinking, I'm near the newspaper, and I know from having played this game times that the newspaper is generally a pretty good place, and if I go there, generally good things happen. So then I went to the newspaper, then I found $5. That was my encounter. Somewhere else, maybe, like, I know the asylum is kind of batty. You don't want to go to the asylum unless you have to. And when you go there, you take the fixed encounter to get saner, because those cards are nuts. So you do get a sense of that. You can make plans of that variety. Also, on the shorter term scales, every turn I've always thought it's helpful during the upkeep phase to plan with the rest of your group what you're going to do. Like, hey, you should go jump in that gate. I'm going to go over here and get some more equipment. And maybe your friend says, no, I'm not ready for the gate. Look, I have this thing going on over here. You got to do the gate. Okay. So you have those short-term plans, which are nice. And you do have that capacity to sort of guide the way things are going. Like, it's a good mix, I think, of being lost to the winds of fate and also having just enough control to try to, like, ride this wave into where you're going. I have more I was going to say in that. Cut this part out. No, cut there. I don't remember.
That's okay. That's all right. All right, here we go. Ready? So, TC, what's been your experience? Where would you put this game on the scale?
Okay, well, whenever I break this game out and I'm describing it to people who haven't played it before, I always tell them, look, okay, this game, base game, when you roll dice, your successes are 5s and 6s. This game straight out the box is trying to crush you because it's skewered in its favor. So to me, it's definitely an experience, but there is enough tactical decisions in the game. Like, if you're in a situation, you're like, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to get something in order to counter this thing. Okay, it's been one since playing, but I think the locations actually have symbols on it. Mm-hmm. So if you hit this location, at least in the base game, before you start making this thing out of control, you're like, okay, if we go here, we can maybe get an elder sign symbol or something. That's going to help us. I've got to hit this place. Now, I'm going to possibly get it, but I could possibly not. So I'm going to hit this place and hope for the best. So you can make some decisions, but it is pretty random what's going to happen. But then again, that's the experience of the game. For me, that's the fun of it, because I love going in. It's like a roller coaster you're just not in control of. And it's such a fun ride that if you're breaking this game out with people who love really strategic, tactical experiences, you've got to warn them right off the bat that they're not going to get this out of this game.
Yeah, it's funny. You guys are talking about these icons on the locations, and it's kind of reminding me a little bit of Dead of Winter, which does the same thing. There's different locations, the gas station, the library, the school, and there are certain types of items that you are more likely to find at those locations than you are, likely to find at other locations. And so it sounds like it employs that same sort of thing. Obviously Arkham Horror was first, but that same sort of thing where you have some idea, but it is still kind of a little bit random because you don't know exactly what it is you're going to get. So TC, it sounds like you come down on the experience side. Don, you come down on the sort of tactical side. So that's good to know because, people need to understand what they're getting into when they're looking at, getting into a game like this. Okay, the next thing I'd like to move to here, guys, would be the rules. One of the things that I've heard is a knock against Arkham Horror and really any of these kinds of games is that the rules overhead is quite high, that they're very dense. There's a lot of flipping through books and looking things up, and a lot of rules that are specifically designed for specific things or items that you might find, et cetera, and that this can make the game a bit overwhelming and adds a lot to the playtime and can be frustrating for new players. Do you think that's a fair criticism to level at Arkham Horror or not? Let's start with you this time, TC.
Okay, you have to understand with this game, the pedigree of this game is straight from a role-playing game. So a lot of the rules complexity comes from the fact that they're trying to adapt the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game into the board game. The rule book itself for the base game, I believe, it's 27 pages, and there's fortunately an index in it. And as Don described earlier, there's 5 phases to the game, and you can reference it pretty easily. At least with the base game. Now, this is like one of my first modern board games, so it was like completely overwhelming. But you get used to it, and you can get the rules are mitigatable. The problem with the rules is when you start adding expansions to this thing, because then not only you're having to reference the expansion, the rulebook for each expansion, the rulebook for the expansion is referencing rules back to the base game, and some of the later expansions change some of the base rules. So that, to me, that's where the rules overhead comes in, because you're like, okay, I've got this expansion, this expansion, this expansion. Okay, I've got to read all these expansions to know how this works and how they relate to the base game and how they change things up. Oh, and by the way, this little box expansion is going to change things up for this. That might affect the bigger board expansion. So if you've ever played with Battlestar Galactica and tried incorporating all those expansions into the game, you're looking at pretty much the same thing.
I got you. Where do you fall on this, Don?
Well, again, I've got most of those expansions in the if you're trying to deal with Innsmouth and the Deep Ones Rising, and then you have to head back to Dunwich and take care of the Dunwich Horror before it eats everybody's faces off. And I don't even remember how Kingsport works. It gets to be a lot. That's why for last night's game with my son, there's also little bits like there's Guardians and Heralds and institutions and personal stories for each character and relationships between each character, and you don't have a good time, I relearned. But it's nice to throw it in. There's so many ways to play this game. Like every great old one you pick, 50 now, is a different enough game to feel different. Every time you play a different character, the game feels different. Every expansion you add, of which like you can toggle on and off like 10 or 12, it makes the game feel different. So you have a lot of control over the kind of game you play, and if you don't want it too complicated.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I mean, listening to you guys describe the game and remembering my play of it, I mean, how are the expansions even necessary in your view? You know what I mean? Like when I think about the variety of cards and the things that were available and the different encounters and the Mythos deck, just in the base game alone, again, I'm going to make the parallel between this and Dead of Winter. There's a lot of game in that box, and you can play the game for an extremely long time before you start seeing the same cards or get a feeling that, oh, I've done this before. So what do you think? In other words, okay, here's I guess what I'm really trying to say. If we factor in the added complexity and sheer kind of pain in the backside that comes with adding in expansions with different rules and rules contradictions, overriding this rule, that rule, et cetera, are the expansions adding enough to make it worth that? Or do you guys sometimes think, you know what, I'd be happy just with the base game? Because one of the things I think that intimidates people about this is this idea of, well, if I get into this, if I go down this rabbit hole, I have to try to hunt all these down. So I'm kind of curious as to what you guys think about how essential the expansions are, since we keep talking about them. So let's start with you on this one, Don.
I think you need more than just the base game to get past 2 384 games. The location encounter decks are like 8 or 9 cards in the base game, and that's just not enough. You will see those multiple times. You probably wouldn't get to the whole Mythos deck until you did 10 or 12 plays. But this is just the perfect game. Like I think they paced those expansions at just the right rate. You play the base game, you do 2 or 3 of those, then you're like, oh, I've seen all these characters, I've seen all these great ones. You go and you buy an expansion, and then you play another 2 or 3 games with that, and it seems more interesting. And the more you want to, if you want to keep playing, you keep buying it, but you also you do get to a point you get anymore. Like, I promised myself that I would buy all the Dominion expansions, but I never got, what was it, Guilds was the last one that was originally planned. Picked that one up because I've got enough Dominion. Like, I've got enough Dominion to do all the Dominion I want to do for a very, very, very long time. And Arkham, I think, is the same way. Like, a lot and have a different experience every time. Yeah, throw an extra couple of bucks on there and you get another 5, 6, 7, 8 games out of it, which is a lot for the money you're spending. But if you only want to play 2 or 3 in your lifetime and you don't have a friend to borrow it from, just buy the base game and you'll be happy with that.
Where do you fall on this, TC?
Well, the wonderful thing about the expansions, in my opinion, is that they're modular. So they're not necessary, and you can actually, you don't have to get like 1, 2, and 3, and they're all chain off each other. So you have to get them in a particular order. So if you play the base game and you like what you're playing, and you're playing it like Don said, you play like 5 or 6 times. You're like, oh man, I would like some more investigators. Go and like the Dunwich like horror that looks pretty neat. I remember reading Dunwich. I'll get the Dunwich because I'll get a new board. I'll get some new monsters to deal with. I'll get some new characters to choose from. And you play with that. And you're like, oh, okay, well, then I want this little box because the King in Yellow sounds pretty cool. Like there's this weird theater where crazy things are going on. You know, we'll get that. And we'll maybe not play with the Dunwich. We'll just use the King in Yellow. But I want to use the characters from the Dunwich expansion. So we'll throw those in there. And so you can like pick and choose what you want to do. Now, one of the things I always try to do at one of our local Game Storm conventions is there's always a guy that brings everything, and he calls it the midnight train to hell. And it's like every single expansion in this thing, it takes up like 4 tables. It's crazy. And what you do going in, you're like, you have to pick out like 5 characters because 4 of them are going to die right off the bat, right? And they're just going to get massacred.
Oh, don't do that.
And there is like no rhyme or reason to this thing, but oh my goodness, we stay up to like sunrise playing it because we were just laughing and hollering and having so much fun. And yeah, it's what you want to do with it and how much money you want to sink into, and ultimately how much you enjoy the game to invest in it, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that perspective, guys, because I'm always curious when it comes to games with a lot of expansions, whether or not the expansions are really necessary or whether they add bloat, you know? I seem to remember more cards at the encounters, but you guys would know far better than I do. So maybe I'm thinking of that Mythos deck and, you know, remember kind of rifling through it and thinking, wow, you know, there's a lot of different cool, horrible, terrible things that'll happen here. And I think I could have fun with that for a long time. But I do get what you're saying, which is if you want to kind of keep things fresh, you want to try different investigators with different strengths and weaknesses and things of that nature. You know, you want to go with the expansion. So before we leave this talk of the expansions, because we've actually talked quite a bit about them so far, can I get an opinion from you first, TC, and then Don? What would you say are the essential expansions? So if I was looking to get into this, what would be maybe give me your top 2 expansions? I'm going to limit you to 2. How about that? That's going to make life hard for you.
You want me to go first this time?
Yeah, I said TC.
Okay.
I said TC.
Sorry.
Have you had enough coffee? Have you had enough coffee?
Sorry.
You might need more coffee.
I do. For me, if you're looking to buy...
All right, hold on. Let's start it clean. Here we go. All right. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, for me, if you're looking for an expansion, I definitely recommend the first one that was made for it, which was Dunwich Horror, because it integrates really well straight into the base game. It gives you more investigators. It gives you another board to come out. I like the way the Dunwich monster triggers. If you're looking for it, that's the big box. I think those are like a $40 or $50 box of the game. If you're looking for, you don't want to invest that much and you're looking for like a smaller one, I would definitely go with one of the King in Yellow is one of my favorites just because it adds that theater with acts and mobs come out in Arkham and start messing with you. And let me tell you what, there's nothing quite like having a mob come after you in the game because they're very difficult to deal with.
That sounds good. All right. And what about you, Don? What would you say are the two essential expansions for this game, if you could only get two.
Okay. Well, first I must quibble with your pronunciation of Dunwich. As New Englander, I must protect it. Originally New Englander, Pennsylvania now.
I'm
Dunwich.
sorry, Dunwich.
Dunwich. Okay, that's out of the way. I'm trying very hard to remember which pieces even come with which expansions, because I bought them all really close together, back to back to back to back. I think Dunwich is probably a good one, because that was the first expansion, and I think you're right on that. And it did have some things that were kind of sort of missing. Was Madness an injury in that came from? Do you recall?
I think so. Yeah, I think like that came in. It was a lot of little things that other expansions subsequently picked up on came straight from Dunwich.
Yeah, because this game has that problem where even though you don't need the second expansion to play with the first one, like a Race for the Galaxy or something, there are expansion to go with the expanded part that came from the first one in case you have that one too, and then we get the whole Miskatonic thing. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Dunwich there, and required small box. The King in Yellow introduced heralds, right? He was the first herald?
Yes. And also they did a second edition of the Curse of the Dark Pharaoh, which fixed a lot of stuff in that one.
Oh, I didn't even know about that. I haven't tried Black Out of the Woods. I can't speak to that one, but I do know it is one of the lowest rated expansions. So not that. I think I'm going to have to end up agreeing. It's Dunwich and the King in Yellow.
Yeah. Just don't start with Miskatonic University.
Yeah, you can't even do that. That's not okay. But if you do have more than a couple of expansions, if you've got like 3 or 4, and one of them is the King in Yellow, you need to get Miskatonic, because the problem with the King in Yellow is they never knew it was going to get this far. And there's a lot of its events are keyed off the Mythos deck, and by the time that gets to be about 4 inches tall, you never get to experience the act breaks. And Miskatonic goes and changes the pacing of that to match the game as it currently stands and with all future expansions. I think it ties it to certain kinds of events rather than specific cards. So you will need Miskatonic if you have the King in Yellow and a few others. With just the King in Yellow, you're probably okay.
Yeah. I didn't think about that. That would dilute it out.
Yeah, you'll never see those act cards, ever.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, guys, because, a lot of people, when you have a game that has this many expansions, people always want to know, what are the really good expansions? I remember when Jim and I did our sort of two-parter on Dominion, we sort of tried to rank them, and poor Alchemy always goes at the bottom of the list.
It goes away pretty quick.
But yeah, everybody likes like one, I think. But anyway, all right. Well, thanks for that. So needless to say, what we have here is we have a game system, and we have a system that has already had quite a few expansions, does not seem to be lacking for material. And if you put them all in there, you're going to end up with this sort of weird, epic, kind of gigantic game physically and in terms of time and in terms of pain, death, and suffering. So if that's your thing, by all means, go for it. So while we're talking about whether or not it's your thing or not, can either of you guys sort of explain why you think this game has got its hooks in you so deeply? Like, when we're dealing constantly with the cult of the new, when there's always new shiny coming out, when there are so many just fantastic games being produced, and there really are. I mean, there's a ton of games out there. There is definitely a lot of chaff, but there is some gold in there too. So how does this game still compete with all the new shiny for you guys? Let's start with you, TC.
Okay, well, Arkham Horror is such a cornerstone for Fantasy Flight games. They have so many products that chain off of that. We haven't even mentioned like just Eldritch Horror, Elder Sign, Mansions of Madness, the Arkham Horror card game, and generally, after I play a game like Arkwright or some kind of just super heavy, crunchy Euro game, I just want to get into a game that I can just chuck some dice and have some fun and just enjoy the experience. I'm always coming back to Arkham before that. Even after playing some of the other Arkham Horror games in the line different types of games in that file system. For some reason, I always come back to Arkham. Maybe because I've already invested the money in it. Maybe because I just enjoyed the experience of it. For me, it's hard to say. Maybe it has to do with it was my first cooperative, this cooperative game. So I'm like, hey guys, we're done beating each other to death. Let's just have the game beat us to death. Let's go in on this thing. Come on. I know it's really hard to define. I think it's just the experience of it. It's unique in my, it's like it's taking all the established conventions of modern board gaming you shouldn't do, and this game does it,
Okay. All right. So it kind of breaks the rules.
Yeah.
And does all the things that everybody tells you you shouldn't do. You keep mentioning experience, and Don, you've mentioned experience as well. Before I go to you for your answer there, Don, let me throw this part at you, TC. How much of your feelings about this game have to do with the people that you're playing with? In other words, is this one of those games that is somewhat group dependent, or does the game just do such a great job of evoking that time, that place, that mythos, that you could be playing with Mr. Fuddy Duddy, who's a Euro snob and saying well, this is entirely random, and you can still have a good time. Like what's the deal with that?
It's probably a little bit of both. I mean, if I'm breaking this game out to teach, I make it very clear what it is. So if I have a Euro snob, that usually steers them away pretty quick. But if I have someone who's like, that sounds kind of fun, I'm like, okay, we are in for a ride on this thing. We're going to have so much fun and just go with it, because the craziest things you can possibly imagine is going to come with this. I've got stories where I was a nun on a motorcycle with a Tommy gun taking down dark ones in the sky. And,
nice.
And there was another experience where my wife was playing with me with a group of people up at GameStorm, and she went into Lost in Time and Space and died. Just ate it. And she got another character out, and there was an event that triggered that said, oh, everybody that's in Lost in Time and Space comes out. And I turn around and go, Carissa, wasn't your character died in there? She's like, yeah. I'm like, is his body parts raining down on us now? He's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. That was not a mechanic in the game. It was a story that came out of it.
Right.
So yeah, and even people who play and said this is random, I can't believe this happened and all that. Even that's a story you can tell. You're like, hey, remember that time you played Arkham Horror with me and all this stuff happened? And he gets red in the face and starts ranting about yeah, you didn't like it, but you remember playing it, and that's better than the other 12 new games you play. You can't even tell me about right now.
Right. So it definitely leaves that kind of an impression. All right, so let's go back to the original question, and then with the sister question for you. What would you have to say about that?
Remind me what the first question was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so let me rephrase that. Let's see if we can pick that up here. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Well, thanks for kind of sharing all that, TC. It does definitely sound like it is a memory generator. Let's maybe put it that way. So, Don, what I want to know from you is, how is it that this game has lasted as long as it has with you, given all of the cult of the new and the shininess? And also, as the follow-up question that I asked TC, do you feel this game is sort of group dependent on the people that you're playing with?
Okay, well, if Arkham was the only game I had, I still couldn't play it frequently. My son wants to play again today, but he's 8 and they're kind of crazy. Once a month, oh man, Azeroth just destroyed the world yesterday, and I just need some time to recover from that. I'm not feeling up to it. People would oftentimes we would have folks over and they'd say, hey, let's play Arkham again. It's been a week or two. I need some more time. But on the other hand, after about 2 or 3 months, I start getting the itch. I got to get back in there. I need that new story. So I'm craving something in that experience again. Obviously, that's why I keep coming back to it. That's why I was so excited to have an option to even talk about it today and get back to it as soon as I can emotionally handle that again.
Okay, so for you actually find the game to be kind of draining. I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. I kind of feel the way you're describing about dominant species. I'll sit down and I'll play Dominant Species, and by the time I'm done playing that game, I'm like mentally and emotionally kind of wrung out. You know, like I kind of feel like I've just been through, this simulated conflict that I've been modeling on the board, and the tension and the wild swings in fortune and the struggle for survival. And by the time I'm done, I'm like, my God, that was such an awesome game. We're all sitting around talking about it. But if someone said to me, yeah, you want to play tomorrow? My answer is no. Like, so are you kind of describing the same sort of thing, do you think, Don? Like that it brings you out? Yeah.
Yeah, like especially if you go in with 8 people on all the expansion boards, no person can do that twice in a row. That's just absolutely impossible. But like after a while, you want to do that again. Like you said, you played some D&D back in the day. I do role-playing games on a regular basis now, and if my group falls apart, or like the holidays always are in campaigns like that, if I haven't had my role-playing fix in a while, Arkham will fill that up. I can go jump in and battle some Cthulhuoid monsters for a while and get a similar fix to that, which is in a way kind of random, in a way out of control, because there's someone telling me what the story is. And in this game, it's the game tells me what the story is, and I still have control to feel like I'm doing something, and we get those great stories out of it too. So that role-playing intersection, I think, is what keeps pulling me back.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I can see that connection, and it's a connection that a lot of board game designers have tried to make. Kevin Wilson and Richard Lanius have really, for a lot of people, hit the right notes here with Arkham Horror. I know Isaac Childress has with Gloomhaven in a lot of ways. That sort of, let's try to put a role-playing game experience into a tabletop game. And, there's always ways in which I kind of think that that's going to fall short. But like you said, they get close enough that you kind of have that feel, and you get a little bit of that fix. And so it's that kind of thing that is bringing you back to it. Do you feel that it's group dependent? I mean, because, great role-playing experiences are often very group dependent.
Entirely group dependent.
Highly group dependent, you would say, Don?
Entirely, completely 100% group dependent for a good role-playing game. And Arkham Horror, I think, is also in the same vein. Like I made a point playing yesterday to read the cards, to do the voices, to get into it that way. And that, like, if you were sitting down playing with soulless neckbeard Euro guy, and he's just like, your best move is to go here. You need to do that. You go get some equipment. I don't care. Like, I don't think that's going to be interesting. That guy's not going to have a good time, and I'm not going to have a good time with that guy. On that same note, the problem of the alpha gamer is often cited as being one that Arkham Horror suffers from. And I kept giving my boy advice last night, and he kept ignoring me, and it was fantastic. Your chances are really much better if you don't read the book. I'm going to do it anyway, Dad. And he rolls a 6. You can't argue with the results.
Yeah, I agree. It's always funny to because I've played this game with an alpha gamer and then you just don't do what they say. Well, I think your better move's this way. Yeah, I'm going over here. Bye.
I don't care.
You jump through a portal, right?
That's great. And if you're playing with a guy who is that alpha gamer who doesn't like it when you disagree with him, don't play with him either. He's too into it.
Right.
And the best part is when you do that random stuff and you roll the random dice and something awesome happens, you can go, "Hey, I was right. You were wrong."
Right. You're like, suck it, Trebek. Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely have that suck it, Trebek kind of moment there in the game. Oh, man. That's an interesting point. And I got to tell you, Don, soulless neckbeard Eurogamer, that is pretty funny.
You heard that one before?
I have not heard the neckbeard Eurogamer before. That's pretty darn funny. I like that. Okay, so that is not a Don Sheldon original that's been around somewhere. I just haven't heard that, huh? Okay,
I learned everything by osmosis, so maybe it is.
I was totally ready to give you credit for that, and kind of copyright soulless neckbeard. Copyright Don Sheldon.
I think I brought my name attached to that. It sounds mean.
All right. Okay. So we've got, we've spent a good amount of time now talking about the variety of the game. the storytelling aspects of the game, the experience of the game, the expandability of the game. We've talked about the basic mechanics of the game, the rules overhead. One of the things that I want to kind of delve into that was on my list to talk to you guys about was the variety of the investigators and the characters. This was something that I really enjoyed my one time that I played. And when I played Elder Sign, which is a game that I had picked up because it was a good solo game from what I'd heard, and it was dice chucking fun. Unfortunately, my luck with dice is so absolutely hideous. I think I won the game like twice. I just was constantly getting beaten down by it. So as much as I kind of enjoyed the art in particular, my God, that was gorgeous art. And the way in which the game worked, I ended up moving it along. But one of the things that I remember is, each of those individual investigators and the idea of, their strength, their sanity, their and the kind of backstories that came with them. I really found that to be just a super fun part of the game. How much do you think a player needs to invest, almost like in a role-playing kind of a way, in the investigator or the character that they're playing? Because like I found myself doing, like you said, Don, doing voices or I mean, I kind of do that normally. Like when I play Betrayal at House on the Hill, Ox Bellows is Canadian. I have no idea why, but he's Canadian. And so, you kind of envisioned a Canadian lumberjack when I do Betrayal at the House on the Hill, and you got Ox as my character. So I kind of like bought into that. What do you guys think about the different investigators? How important do you think is it to kind of buy into your role in the game? Let's start with you on this one. What do you think, Don?
It's nice to have the variety. Like every time you play a new one, you're like, yeah. Or if you have a favorite, Hank Sampson, the farmhand, is a popular with the people that I play with because he just is. Great. You get a great story about it. People keep going back to him. Like me, I want to do the variety. I want to try everybody at least once. By the end of the game, I don't think you're remembering that you're Jenny Barnes, whatever her subtitle is, but the individual mechanics.
Dilettante.
What's that?
She's a dilettante.
Dilettante. Oh, that's not a job anyway. Like by the end, I don't think that you're remembering that, but it is a good hook to bring you in the beginning. And the characters are, amazingly, even though there's like 50 now, I think they are all different enough because they have very unique little special powers. And the time that you get to do your one special thing, like, wait, I can do this thing once per game, pow, and then you're awesome. And having that picture and that personality to go into, I think it reminds you to do that, because how sad are you when you're like, oh, if I had only remembered that I had, then maybe Azathoth wouldn't have. It's a weird. I'm getting both answers on both sides of this question because it's important for that engagement, but by the end it fades away and you're just gray old ones if you're lucky.
Right.
Maybe that's like a commentary on the nature of man and Cthulhu. If those just know where I'm going with this.
I don't know, but it was getting pretty dark and it was getting kind of fun.
Well,
so
yeah, you forget who you are once you're fighting the thing that destroys reality.
As your sanity is torn away,
it's part of the theme.
as your sanity is torn away, so is your identity. Something like that.
Yeah.
You forget who you are. That's good stuff. What do you think, TC? Do you think that it's important to try to embrace who you are in the game, or do you think it doesn't really matter all that much?
I think it does, because if you're trying to once you get some of the expansions, you're looking through the characters and you can actually try to find a character you can relate to. I always pick the Harvey Walters, the old curmudgeon-y professor guy. I love running around with him. And it gives you a connection to the character. It gives you the investment in the game, right? And one of the things Arkham Horror did that subsequent other Arkham style games lost was you can actually adjust your stats a bit in the Arkham Horror. So you can you crank one up and one goes down because you have like that track and the number goes up and so you can the character reflects those stats. You can manipulate a bit, which I really missed that when it came.
Characters that really come out in that those tracks, I think.
Yeah, so the character type, the character archetype defines those stats you're playing with. So if you're like, dude, I want a guy who's like can investigate like crazy. You pick the guy who can. You can adjust it, but the numbers you're adjusting are pretty high compared to the other characters. And I really missed that in Eldritch Horror and Elder Sign and all that. You can tweak your character a little bit, and you're invested in it. And that's one of the things I was happy about the Arkham Horror card game, because they brought that back, because you're actually building a deck around a character, and that defines the character. But we won't get into that. But yeah, I think it definitely enhances the experience of the game and your investment in it if you go into the character archetypes and play with them that way.
Yeah. That's kind of the way I was kind of thinking about it. And again, because I've only played Arkham once, I'm going to draw on my closest parallel, which is Dead of Winter. And you have your character cards for that. I mean, I remember one time, we played a game with, Sparky the dog, and I had Sparky, and Sparky got himself like all freaked out on coke or something. He became drug addicted. So Sparky was this drug addicted dog, and he was tearing all through the place.
You got the crossroad?
Yeah, we got a
crossroad card that triggered that.
Yes,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So Sparky was like all coked out, and so we ended up just joking about it for the rest of the night about how fast Sparky was and how alert Sparky was, and Sparky ended up dying, of course, because don't do drugs, kids. This is definitely a serious thing.
And every game with an animal was better.
Exactly. So
there's a dog in
Sparky
Arkham.
Was all. Yeah, I mean, and I mean that kind of character involvement and investment was just, it was really memorable, and it makes it a lot of fun.
And it was an absolute random event, because it's one card in that stack of crossover cards that can only trigger if you've got the character.
Right. It had something to do with, the character is now addicted to drugs or something. And that means that they're going to, I forget what they were going to like withhold things, or, and we just had a blast with that. It was a kind of a role-playing crossover. So that's why I was asking about the characters there. And, I really did, Don, kind of like your answer as well, which is, it gives you the hook to get you into the game. And then later in the game, you are so concerned with trying to do what you need to do that does kind of maybe fade into the background a little bit. So I do understand, I think, your answer as well, and that in the beginning, it's very important. It gives you that sort of gateway into the world. But then as the pressure mounts and the game is ramping up and you're coming close to either winning or losing, you kind of that kind of goes on the back burner as you're trying to desperately plan how to accomplish it. Yeah, absolutely. So now the last thing about the characters I wanted to talk about is, do you all feel that there are any that are overpowered, or are there any overpowered combos that you found of investigators that could be used?
Hank Sampson. Hank Sampson is just amazing. He doesn't have to roll horror checks. We're never like, everybody that I play with, they want to have him because you can just go fight monsters and never go crazy. I think Silas Marsh, I think is his name, the guy from Innsmouth. Well, if you're playing with Innsmouth, because he has a much easier time getting there than anybody else, and if you need to get to Innsmouth quick, he's your man.
All right, Don, I'm gonna ask you to stop, and we're gonna back up, and I want you to talk about Silas again. I got the first guy, but then when you started talking about Silas, you kind of pinged out on me there. So here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
I think if you're playing with the Innsmouth expansion, one of the characters from it is, I think his name is Silas Marsh. He's able to travel from Arkham to Innsmouth much more easily, and that can be vitally important at certain times. So if you have Innsmouth going around as well. There was, I think the cellist did something where she like collects clues just by being nearby. That one seemed a little overpowered to me. The 1 or 2 times we had it, I might have that incorrect. I mean, there's so much going on in this game. Who can keep it all straight? Those are the 3 that come to mind.
What about you, TC? Have you found anything that you felt was kind of that stuck out to you as being maybe overpowered?
Not character-wise. I mean, Don was talking about how that doesn't break the game. I mean, I haven't run across any a specific combination of characters that you can just run through the game and it's no problem, and you just beat the game in like 45 minutes, right? It's like we did it, we're done, we're finished. I haven't run across that. Nothing that's that overpowered. But then again, balance in this game is not its strong suit, so it could exist.
I was amazed how consistently challenging, without being too challenging, it is, given how much random stuff is going on. To have the outcome be kind of even keeled, kind of surprising.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. How do you have a system that is built on the sort of random card flip and yet have it in some way balanced enough that, as TC said, you don't have these games where it's like, you lose. I mean, I remember Betrayal at the House on the Hill had that problem. There were a couple of dead end corners that you could get into and you're stuck. Like you might as well just reset the game because you can't get out of that. This game doesn't have that. So, that's definitely a testament to the design. Yeah, exactly. So, funny you mentioned time, TC, because that was one of the last things I wanted to talk about was what do you guys think is the average playtime for Arkham Horror base game so that people out there know what they're getting into? Because my experience was what's on BGG is not really accurate. What have you guys found in your experience?
Who goes first?
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, we'll edit that out. Here we go. Let's go with TC first. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
So your play length, 3 to 5 hours for base game, I've found, depending on how badly things go for you. But and the other thing the biggest thing you have to factor into playtime is setup on this thing. The setup is pretty intense. So, just setting it up to play, it's going to take you a while, depending on how many expansions you throw into the thing.
Okay. All right. Don, what do you think?
Well, I just did this yesterday, but it was 2 players. One of us was 8. And like I said, there was an unhappy baby in the house as well. Hours. Count changes a lot. Like you really don't think it matters that much because you're getting 1 Mythos card each time, and that's sort of the game timer. But 2 players versus it's a big change. So I think like the BGG time or the time listed on the box may be accurate base game, and just 2 anything past that is going to be monumentally larger. And I will point out, that setup is a beast. Like I have a literal tackle box, and then a couple other boxes of things, and I got my system down. Like we open this thing up, I throw this one, and we're almost good to go. I mean, just shuffling the decks. That's like 15 minutes right there. It's maddening.
I forgot to mention player count's going to add significantly to a 2-player game is going to be a lot shorter than an 8-player game.
Is this something that you really feel plays decently with a wide variety of players, like as far as 2-player, 3-player, etc.? Why don't we start off with this one with Don? All right, we'll do that again. We'll do that again because that got sloppy. That's my fault. All right, here we go. Well, it's interesting you mentioned player count there. I wouldn't have really thought this was a 2-player game. I mean, how do you guys feel about this? Do you think that this plays equally well at different player counts, 2, 3, 4, etc.? What do you think, Don?
I think 2, 3, 4 is probably a good sweet spot. If everyone knows what they're doing, you can get through it in maybe a listed time. But again, once you get it to that big number, that's its own special kind of fun. Like when you have 6 hours, I love an 8-player game. Or what we often do is we'll do 4 players each with 2 characters. Mm-hmm. That way you can get 2 different kinds of experiences simultaneously. That can be a lot of fun as well. But playing with just 2 people with 1 character each, and that was a grand old time too. You can even do it solo. If you really want, you can play just by yourself, just with 1 character, or you can play by yourself playing 8 characters at once, which I'm not sure if that's fun, but seeing how every facet of this has been enjoyable, I might try that out.
There you go. What about you, TC? What do you think is a good player count for this?
I found the sweet spot in this game to be like 4 to 5. Anything more than that, I typically want to have people who already know how to play the game, so I don't have to add rules overhead to the length of the time to play the game. I've tried it at 2 or for me, it's a group game. The more people you throw in this game, the more fun you're going to have. But that is going to substantially add to the length of it. And typically, I want to keep it at least as within a night. So I usually we got 3 to 5 people. You guys want to play Arkham? or if you guys want to chuck some dice and have some fun.
Well, all right. It sounds like it's very flexible in that regard, which is definitely a feature of the game, I would say. So, all right. We have covered, I think, most of the bases about this game, but I always like to ask people, Don, what are your complaints about the game? Like, if there's one thing you could change or one thing you're very unhappy with, what would that be?
Ooh, good one. I think they've changed the rule book in reprints. The one I have, I am not impressed with. That's sort of mine, though. What would I change? You know what? Every time you keep mentioning Dead of Winter, which I've only played once, if they had like a Crossroads thing in Arkham, crazy. Just how cool would that be? There's the one, I forget what expansion it's in. There's one item card you can get, whichever one added missions. Option of going rogue and joining the bad guys, and that's one card out of like a million, and it's monumentally difficult to do. But that is the only way in this fully co-op multiplayer game to win by yourself. If it does, right, somebody has done something terribly wrong. But more options like that, I think, could be really interesting. If you could throw in the Crossroads system, ooh, that'd be something cool.
Yeah, that sounds like that could be fun. TC, what about you? Is there something that you would like to have seen that wasn't there? Something you'd like to get rid of? Something you'd like to change?
My biggest complaint, there's a few things about this game. One of them is I don't like those Hobbit-sized cards. Those tiny cards drive me up the wall. And the older I get, the harder it is for me to read tiny text anyway. So I think it was the rolling dice and taking names that term to coin Hobbit-sized cards, which are those tiny little cards. So you like have just dealing with those tiny cards. It's like, oh my gosh, just holding them in
a lot of text.
Oh yeah, they just cram so much text. You're like, okay, hang on a second, guys. The other thing is, for all the expansions, for everything they added to this game and just made it just bloated and fun and crazy, it didn't fundamentally change the game, which is the game is always there's a big giant monster you're going to have to deal with that's going to wake up at the end of the game. You think with all the expansions they added to that, they might have changed that, but nope. When you boil the game down to it, yeah, you never, it's always fight the elder monster at the end. Either it's going to crush you, or you're going to prevent it from waking up, or you're going to defeat it. All the expansions, everything, you still do that after 20 expansions released for this game.
Yeah, that is something that I could see, maybe as a bit of a missed opportunity. Don, you wanted to talk a little bit about the win conditions from what I heard there. Yeah,
I just realized that.
If you want to go over that.
Yeah, in my rules explanation, I forgot to tell you how to win. I mentioned the 4 or 5 ways to summon the Great Old One, and of course, him killing your party is one way to lose, or is the main way to lose. But the way that you win, there are actually 2. One is to gates, which is like to super close them. The gate opens, you go in, you come out, you do a thing, you close the gate. If there are after you close the gate, you may seal it if you have enough clues. If you have 6 seals, then you win. The other way is if you have, so you've closed them all, and you have closed at least 1 per player. That is the second way to win. Important to somebody trying to learn to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then there's also the chance that you have that kind of final battle at the end, yes?
Yeah, winning the final. If you were able to defeat the Great Old One in battle, then that also wins. But there are some Great Old Ones where that is literally not an option. And where it is, even that's hard.
And when it wakes up, that's it. It's just the world's done. You failed.
Yeah. You have lost it all for all of us is really probably more.
I love the text on that card. The way that it describes that is just so humorous to me.
And that's one of the things I like about the Arkham Horror card game is that it changes that up. So every game you play of that, you're not just, there's different objectives to do to win that scenario. And I just kind of wish Arkham Horror did something besides every single time you play, you're always trying to prevent the monster from waking up or defeating it or something.
Gotcha.
Eldritch, right? I only played Eldritch once, and don't they have different kind of scenario things where there's different goals? Either of you guys know?
Yeah, Eldritch, you still have to fight the Elder God, but there's quests you do along the way. And Eldritch Horror, like Arkham Horror.
Talking about?
Yeah. Oh no, what I was talking about was there's an Arkham Horror card game, which is a living card game. which
Oh yeah,
uses
I know.
living card game.
I got that.
Yeah.
But like when they redid Arkham as Eldritch, they tried to change those tweaks, and I don't know how much they corrected that particular complaint in that update, and or if you've played that one, if you're familiar with that, if that actually does correct it in the way you were hoping that Arkham was.
Yeah, I've played Eldritch. What Eldritch does is it broadens the scope of the game, where it's not just the city of Arkham is like all over the world, but you're still going after, the doom tracks going up, and there's an elder god you're having to confront, but there's different ways to mitigate that by completing quests and things.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for giving us a little bit of perspective on that. I have not tried that, so I had nothing to contribute there. But, well, guys, I think we've done a pretty darn good job with your help, Don, and your help, TC, of kind of giving a good idea of the basics of the game, how it's played, the things that might appeal to people, the kind of experience they're going to be in for, should they choose to play, the expansions, the characters, all of that fun stuff. Before we kind of draw this to a close, though, Don, one of the things I always do is ask, if there's anything else that you kind of wanted to talk about that we have not yet hit upon.
Does it have to be about Arkham Horror?
It can be about whatever you would like. So you go ahead. You are the guest.
Way too many board gaming podcasts. My hands and my eyes are busy, but I have 8 free hours for my ears every day at work, and I put in 16 to 17 hours of audio, which and I hear everyone talking about Gen Con and Origins and all these things, but I know you have a lot of experience with the WBC. Pennsylvania, I've never been, and I would love to know more about it.
Well, you've come to the right place. So the WBC. The WBC is a very old game convention. It's been around for quite some time. It started off, I believe, as like Avalon Con or something down in Maryland, which was, a convention where people would come and play all the old Avalon Hill titles that a lot of us grew up with. Thinking about things like Midway and Panzer Blitz and these great old games that Avalon Hill used to put out. And so that convention grew and grew, and then eventually ended up moving into the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. And it was the World Board Gaming Championship. So the unique thing about the WBC is that it is a competitive convention. In other words, you can go to the WBC and you can sign up to participate in tournaments. The tournaments can be in anything from Ticket to Ride, which a friend of the show, Eric Brocious, his wife runs the Ticket to Ride tournament every year, which, as you can imagine, is an enormous undertaking, a huge tournament. Or you could go, I remember one year my wife and I went and we participated in the Raw the Dice Game tournament. There are so many tournaments that are offered every year. Some that are sort of staples and classics, like the Medici tournament that Matt Thompson has talked about on the show before. And there's, tournaments for brass and tournaments for so many different titles. And every year they sort of put out a list, like people can nominate games. And if there's enough interest in that game, it'll be put on the schedule for a tournament. And so a lot of the WBC for many, many years was focused on tournament gameplay. And it was focused on tournament gameplay starting, of course, with war games and sort of that scene. A friend of mine, Justin Nordstrom, who's been on the show many times, he used to go for the Paths of Glory, tournament. And so it kind of started off that way, is my understanding. Then as sort of Eurogaming sort of gained popularity, and these kind of games that, we're talking about even now, they started to be offered in a tournament format. So it wasn't just, sort of the grognard crowd, but, people from all different, walks of life who like different types of board gaming. And then I would say the most recent sort of evolution of the convention has become the open gaming, which goes on. So the tournaments are very friendly for the most part. You're always going to get the chance to be in a tournament where you're with someone who takes themselves way too seriously and, kind of is a bit of a jerk about it. But for the most part, it's just people getting together and having a lot of fun. But if that's not your scene, there's a huge sort of open gaming scene at the WBC where people get together. They have big, ballroom where there's lots and lots of open table space and a very large, respectable library, not like BGG Con, which is probably my favorite library that I've ever seen is BGG Con's library. It's just fantastic. But a very nice library of games that you can sign out and play, and take back to your table and learn. And they have some systems set up. A lot of cons do now where if you're open gaming and you want someone to teach, you have like a little flag. It's like, looking for a teacher or looking for a players or, whatever it happens to be. So my family has primarily been going for the open gaming for as long as we've been going. And the WBC also always had some nice kids things going on. They had kids rooms, they had kids tournaments. And it was a safe place. It was a fantastic kind of a thing that was offered. So when my kids were younger, they were all into those tournaments and going to the kids room. And so it really is a very nice, I would say, mid-sized con. It sounds to me as though it's between your local con where you have like 400 or 500 people and Origins. It's nowhere near Gen Con size, but it's pretty big. But it's a long convention because a lot of the tournament action happens during the week prior to the main week, which is sort of the pre-con week, which is the really heavy-duty war game tournaments. Because some of these games, like, are you going to have a Here I Stand tournament? that's going to take a little while. That's an 8-hour game. So yeah, it's a very unique sort of board gaming convention. Don Greenwood is the guy who runs it and has been running it forever. The last thing that's happened with the WBC is they've moved to Seven Springs, which is out in Western PA. And last year was the inaugural at the Seven Springs resort there. And it was interesting. It was in many ways an upgrade from Lancaster as far as the facilities go. In some ways, it was a downgrade, at least for me personally. This is just my opinion, from Lancaster in the options for, say, food, shopping, accommodations. I don't know how many years my family and I stayed at the Red Roof Inn right across from the Lancaster Host. And, we get a room for $100. And you made the death run across the main street. And, you got to the convention center and you stayed there all day. And it was awesome, Seven now
Springs is a bit more expensive, I imagine.
Seven Springs is a bit more expensive, and you're kind of, it is what it is. Yeah, it's kind of remote, and so you're not going to be able to say, hey, who wants to run out to the local fast food place and grab a bunch of burgers and fries and stuff and bring them back. You're not going to get that. Things are way too far away for that. So you are kind of at the mercy of the foods that they have to offer there. The food that they have to offer is fine, but it's expensive. And so that was kind of the biggest sort of downer for me. Everything else was, like I said, a very nice upgrade. And so I'm hopeful that in the future, maybe they're going to be able to offer some more options as far as food goes for people who aren't made of money. The pizza shop was perfectly reasonable, but the restaurants were, you're looking at anywhere from $12, $15 to $25 a person for a meal. And that's just kind of expensive. Like I can't really pull that off, especially with a family of 5. It's just too much. Oh, yeah. So, what we've done to combat that Seven Springs offers, which is quite nice, is you can rent like a villa. You can rent like a little condo. And if you've got enough people going, it's quite reasonable. You can get your costs down considerably. And so you rent one of their villas. It has a full kitchen, and you just cook yourself. You bring your own food in. You bring a cooler to the convention floor so that you've got lunch with you, and that'll really simplify things, I think, quite a bit. So I like the WBC because it's been part of what my family has done in board gaming for many, many years. And so I'm hopeful that things will continue to improve as time goes on. Western PA is beautiful. One of the other things that's a nice addition about Seven Springs is that there's hiking, there's biking trails, there's, I think, like zip lines. There's like all of these kind of outdoor activities, which is really kind of cool because after being cooped up inside a room, you know, sometimes it's nice to get outside.
And that happens in July-ish?
Yes, yeah, that usually happens towards the end of July is usually when the convention is. So, you know, again, gamesurplus.com, they've got information about the WBC right on their website. So if anybody's interested in that, it's a very unique convention, and it's one that I'm very fond of. So I hope that answers your questions, and I would definitely encourage you to go. Yeah.
Hour away. My birthday's in July. I'm liking the sound of this.
That's a beautiful thing. Well, if you decide to go, you know, be sure to, you know, drop a line and let me know, because I'm usually there, and maybe we can get a game in sometime.
I would love to. I can't this year. I'm going to see an eclipse, and I can't get more time off work.
Okay.
Well, if you can't make it, just reading some of those sessions reports that come out of the WBC is amazing. In particular, reading what people did in Twilight Struggle to win the game. Just watching them and reading that kind of stuff is, to me, is just fascinating. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, you get a lot of people. Yeah,
to bring it back, the stories you would get from an Arkham horror game those would be excellently as well.
Absolutely. You know, because there's always people playing. Believe me, you know, Al and Shelley are always there playing Arkham Horror, and there's always a crew playing a raucous game or two of that almost every single night of the con. Somebody's firing up Arkham Horror. So lots of opportunities for Arkham Horror fans, like you said, Don, to bring it all back full circle. So, guys, I want to thank both of you for agreeing to be on the show and for sharing your knowledge and experience about the whole Arkham Horror system. You know, we could spend a whole episode after this one talking about all the spin-offs, you know, all of the other, you know, games that have arisen from this kind of original Arkham Horror game, going all the way back to you know, the 70s, as you shared with us earlier. I'm sorry, 87. I had the 7 in my head for that original Arkham Horror game, all the way up into, you know, the modern iterations that we know now. So, guys, I want to thank you both for being on the show. Don, thanks for taking the time.
Oh, I had a great time. As soon as I find another game we haven't done yet, I'll be asking again.
There we go. Well, it would be a pleasure. And TC, as always, it's fun to have you on, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with us and lend your expertise about Arkham Horror.
Thank you very much. I just want to reiterate that this is one of the cornerstone games. You really need to at least try it once. And just to speak to the popularity of this title for Fantasy Flight, it's impossible to find Arkham Horror cards now for the Arkham Horror card game. This I don't know what you'd call it.
Living card game system, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the setting is it just people play different iterations, different types of game with the Cthulhu mythos, and it all comes right back to here, and it's something to experience.
Well, thank you for that parting shot there, and I would agree with you. I was really glad that I had the opportunity to play it once, and I would probably play it again if I was playing with you know, the right group of people and people that would be a little patient with me trying to remember the game. And sounds like it would be fun to play this game with you two. So I want to say for Don Sheldon and for TC Reed, I want to say thanks to everybody out there for listening, and have a great night. All right, I'm going to hit stop broadcast here.